Well, hello formally to everyone. It's time for us to start. My name is Luís Vaz Carneiro, and I'll be the moderator of this panel. I'm professor at Porto Faculty of Architecture, and with the help of Rafael Sousa Santos, he's a PhD student in our school, acting as a facilitator. This session title is Housing Design, Modes of Education and Practice. I mean, connecting two different realities, but that complement each other. And we'll have the participation of Débora Domingo Calabuig from the Polytechnic University of Valencia. She's a professor in the School of Architecture. Olá, Débora, como estás? Francisco Savero Ferra from the University of Bologna, professor Department of Architecture, which presence I thank also. We were supposed to have Gabriella Martini, a student from Italy, from Bologna, Italy, and but for personal reasons she could be with us. We have also Leo. I'm sorry if I'm not speaking saying the Modrchin. Modrchin. Yes, yeah. Like
that's correct.
Yes. Oh, I put it right. Okay, thank you. He's a professor at the Faculty of Architecture of Zagreb. Nikos Ktemas, also welcome, from National Technical University of Athens. Is a professor at School of Architecture also. We have also Louise Blais. She's a student from Toulouse School of Architecture. Hello, Louise. And Ricardo Carvalho is from Portugal. He's a professor at University, Autonomous University in Lisbon. Olá, Ricardo, viva mais uma vez. Well, we'll, as a moderator, I prepared a small text, is in the program. It can be read there. I expect it to be open enough to allow each member of the panel to make his first intervention. I suggest 5, 6, 7 minutes most intervention, because we have Gabriella is not here, so you can use that time. And then we'll have a period for questions or short statements by the public that can be answered by us, or developed or even contradicted by the panel. To those attending in YouTube, you may also put short questions in the form. There is a form in the right side of the YouTube video, and we'll try to answer or explain or comment after the initial interventions. We will finish, well, exactly in 1 hour, so 30 past 16, for a virtual coffee break. And later we'll have a recap section, and I will make a only 3 minutes synthesis of what has been said here. Probably an impossible task, but I'll try it anyway. So following the ordering program, let's start with Débora. Débora, what's your view and experience about the modes of education and practice in housing design, mainly in your school, but you can speak about anything.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me to this topic. And well, hello to everybody. By reading the text of the introduction of this session and trying to answer the questions, I reflected on a tweet that like a week ago I retweeted on my own tweet account that said, unpopular opinion to points architecture schools should stop educating as if we could keep on raising new buildings ad infinitum, as if there is not a hardcore financial recession, or as if the business model of a classic architecture office was, in most locations, financially viable. And this is a general feeling on what is happening on architecture, also related to education. And I have my own doubt. Of course, I like it. It is and I retweet it. But at the same time, I experienced some doubts because in the following discussion, some of the answers were, okay, we agree, but not in the case of housing. So I asked myself about this topic regarding housing. Should we be building housing as ad infinitum? Should we learn to design houses as we have been teaching until now? And I wanted to share my own experience of what a traditional learning on housing design is in my school, to try to position myself and see if others agree, or at least to share my doubts. Okay, in Spain, the bachelor in architecture lasts 5 years, and then we have a master degree that is only for 1 year. We have studios every year, from the first one to the last one, and I am a professor on a studio, and the topic on the housing comes every year, basically in the 3 first years. So the first year is about teaching them the very basic things about dimensions, functionality of regularly, like cordial houses, row houses, something like that. So we are talking about individual housing. And then once they know the tools, on the second year, we teach them about the mechanisms that assemble together the different cells. So it's about blocks, it's about towers, it's about different kinds of aggregation, and experiencing also the typology. In a third year level, you will find like a more advanced teaching that has to do with main strategies to make, for example, resilient houses. So we talk about flexibility, adaptability, resilient society. So we go to the scale of urban planning, and for regularly 4th and 5th year are used 2 other topics. This is a very traditional way of teaching, and perhaps in Portugal we have some points in common. I don't know if in France or in Greece or in Zagreb we have this kind of teaching, but it allows us to just first of all create the fundamentals of the housing, and then to reflect about new ways of inhabiting. I think this is a good way. In fact, I think that we are teaching in a traditional, and it works. But I think that we should strengthen a little bit more the upper levels. So we reflect a little bit more on climate change, on the new challenges that we should be facing. We should focus more on this responsible side of the architect. Of course, we try to transfer to our students about the social service that architecture should be, because we are in charge of this, and because the right for housing is a very let's say important right, and social housing should be like learned for everybody, because we are mostly building housing. But of course, there are other opportunities for architecture. But right now, what we need is good housing. So I don't know. I totally agree, as I said before, with the tweet. So we should be perhaps focusing on how to reconvert, how to readapt the already existing housing buildings. But at the same time, I think that I believe that there is a need to still teach what the fundamentals are in a very traditional way. And that's my worry right now about our first approach about the topic. So if I had to answer to your 3 questions, or the 3 questions that were stated on aims, on pedagogy, and on purpose, 3 of them will be yes, for sure. We need to make conscious awareness about climate change and how the design is going to be modified by this. On pedagogy, of course, this is something that I always insist on. We are a social service as architects, so the first right is a right for housing, and we need to transfer that to our students. and for sure on purpose. May the Southern School of Architecture find the foster or different new European approach. Of course, we share a way of living. We share the Mediterranean. We share the food. We share many things that make us think that we could collectively build a new comprehension for the housing topic. I will stop now because I think that I have already spent, I don't know if I have spent my 5, 6, 7 minutes, but I don't want.
Can have a minute more if you want.
Oh, okay.
but it's perfect. We can proceed the discussion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next one is Saverio. Saverio, what's your views on these subjects?
Well, thank you, Luis, about your draft of this panel that I found really interesting, even the 3 questions that you asked to us. We have in Cesena at the University of Bologna, we have a very similar degree like this one that Deborah just did the outline. We have a 5 years courses, and every year we have a studio, and first year we also teach how to design houses, because this is for sure one of the most urgent thing that we have as an architect, and then is what the students they will have when they will be graduated to produce when they will start their own profession. So I really agree with Deborah that the architect is a civil service. And this involves also, I think, your second question about the to be a responsible profession or social and climate activism, how to involve the students. I think that like Ernesto Ranterroges, the Italian, of the group BBPR, used to say that was the teacher of Giorgio Grassi, Aldo Rossi, and of the Italian school, let's say, yes. Of the Tendenza. He used to say that we, as a professor, first we have to teach how to be a responsible person acting in the society. So for sure, with our teaching, with our pedagogical process, we have to try to teach how to be responsible in terms of the society where we are working. In this way, we also we have studies of technology in order to save energies with the building, to be sustainable in our construction. But I think the most important part is we don't have to make a confusion about the tools that we have as architects in order to build in the, let's say, correct way. If we don't know how to build, I mean, it's very important to know how to put one brick over another one, of course. This means we need to know and need to teach the students how to build in correct way in terms of sustainable building. But I think it's very important to teach them what a building or a new neighborhood involved in the place where that we will build. So that's why we think that the theories of architecture is very important, and it's very important for us to teach how to learn from the historical town, or that means even the modern tradition, not only the we don't stop, for instance, on the Renaissance era, but even from the big great masters that we all study, like Nice or Gropius, we have to learn, of course, from them. But important thing is to start from the best examples that we already found in the towns, because it's what something happened, I think, all over Europe after World War II, and heard from João Pedro Xavier talking about the Portuguese town the second half of the 20th century, or from Gonzalo Birne that almost said the same things of this sort of sprawl of our town that were not able to build a not only sustainable by the point of view of the energies, but are not sustainable by the social point of view, are not sustainable by the point of the public space that those new neighbor created. So we think that it's very important to understand why we are still living in the towns formed by the Romans or wherever, and we still live in a great way in this town. Why people prefer still live in the old towns than in some suburban areas? This is for several reasons, for social question, of course, but also because the environment that is in those towns is normally better than in some neighbors built it starting from the 50s or 60s and 70s, where you need to spend a lot of energy to move, to go to school or to go to your work, when in reality the compact town was probably the more sustainable things. For sure, then there are several options that you can try to teach the students from the modernities. But one question is, we probably have to rethink at some neighbor design. And sometimes in Italy we say, but I think it's the same in Europe, to rebuild on the already built it. We need to refurbish several new neighborhoods because of several problems, because of a construction that are you need a lot of energy to heat or to cool it, but also you need a lot of energies to move from one side to the other one. In Italy, we have this phenomenon that the population is reducing. It's a country that is not, in terms of population, is not growing anymore. I don't know how it's in Spain, how it's in Greece, or how it's in Portugal. But this gives us the opportunity of not building new neighborhoods, but we need probably to turn down some entire neighborhood to transform that into green spots or wherever, and to work instead in more undeveloped area in order to transform it for a place how to live. So I think it's very important to teach the students to try to understand and read from the existing examples of the architecture of the towns, what are the best resolution and what are the best, are the place where people since 50, 100 years still live in the right way. And I think this is in the right way, but also saving the looking at all the problem of saving energy and taking care of the climate change. I'm not sure that we have to rethink from zero the architecture. I think it's a progressive topic to do new architecture, looking at the tradition, but using the etymology of the word. What does it mean, tradition? It's from the Latin tradere, that means tramandare. Sorry, don't remember the English word. Tramandare is to, but also to betrayed. Also to betrayed something. You have to look at the past, but to reinvent it in a new way. But starting from some fixed point that we heredited from our ancestors. Architecture is not an object. Adolf Loos used to say that the difference between art and architecture is that art is a private thing. Architecture is a social thing. So that's why when we build something, we do that for the society. That's why we have to listen at the people. We have to take care of the needs of the population. We cannot just project in a site a strange form that belongs only to our thought, but something that is. Sorry, I get lost.
Okay, no, don't worry. Leo, what's your views on this?
Let me be like a student here by following your notes and inserting my comments, and what I will be able to reinterpret now remains to be seen. But generally, I like the idea of the subject of housing as a vehicle for transforming of the architectural pedagogy, especially in our own case. Our school is still very much embedded into this kind of functionalist typological way of studying, starting from a family house, multiple dwellings, schools. In other words, as we progress in the complexity of assignments, we still follow, or the basis is always this kind of like a very clear typological thing. And in my own opinion, and here I'm not trying to express the opinion of the school, because the school is like a very lively and complex entity, and each teacher brings one's own experience. But I would say the housing seems to me like a perfect subject matter to as possibly the only, and I'm saying this in a very tentative terms, basic knowledge of architecture that can be foundation for all other typological studies. In that regard, I think that the subject of usable spaces, Neufeld, the standards, all the kind of like a basic architectural disciplines seem to be a kind of perfect vehicle to give students métier, so to speak, the technical knowledge on which they can then imply and add more and more complex issues in architecture. So in that regard, I think housing the subject matter, or the residential architecture, could be this kind of like anchor, just perhaps also from the point of view that, who knows what percentage of residential architecture is in a way the major body of built environment. And it's so frequently completely out of touch of architectural profession. So this paradox that we can use the housing as a kind of learning tool and as a substrate for all other architectural knowledge seems to me very interesting. The second thing I would stress also perhaps comes from a personal experience of teaching, and that's the idea of the relationship between the cells, the aggregation, as Deborah was saying, the unit and the whole. And it seems to me then in the environment where we are, we either have a very precisely prescribed housing standards in the form of subsidized housing program of Croatian government, which has produced like a pretty substantial body of new architecture when they were still using the architectural competitions for young architects, and I'm talking about like 20 years ago. And that program is now abandoned. And the other polar opposite is the market. We know how the market-oriented apartment in Croatia looks like, and it's probably not very much different from an apartment in either of our countries, or even in New York, with the exception that this big socialist housing project would not have a doorman at the entrance, but the apartment or the basic notion of living space remains to be the same. So I think that what is the interesting subject matter for experimentation and innovation in architectural teaching really is this, what we call common areas, something that is beyond the walls of the residential unit. And obviously, we are, here I'm referring also to these grand projects of the so-called failed socialist models of housing that we have, and which really have some prototypes of space that somehow encourage the social interaction, but they basically fail. The galleries, the interior streets, all these like destroyed buildings. Peter Nallison, Smithson, Robin Hood. So the paradox that the public's component of the residential space proved to be like an utter failure and the cause to destroy this housing. So is there a new way to interpret this in the new conditions? Also from the climate point of view, a gallery is like your thermal bridge. So how do we interpret a gallery in a residential building in considering the new standards and way of thinking? Is there a space in between the urban and the rural? Do we grow our own food in our own apartments? So these are the ideas that seem to me very important, and they can certainly be learned from previous models. So in a way, I'm sounding like I'm a skeptic. But I'm then touching to what was said before about the Scandinavian or like a northern models. We do want to somehow capitalize on our 3,000 or 2,000 years old building experience where sustainability was understood by itself. Also, I would say that, from a place like Croatia, we do have some kind of credit for the very small carbon footprint that we have. In other words, the scarcity of means somehow is saying or pointing to certain aspects of architecture that they are not necessarily following the kind of models that are imposed on building something that is not logical, rational, or I would even say economical. So on these three elements, I would stop, and I hope that as we discuss a little bit, that some of these ideas can be expanded also by you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for your contribution. And we continue with Nikos. Nikos, what's your point of view?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you once again for this invitation. I feel a little awkward, and I will explain why. I am not. I'm a practitioner. I have my office in Athens, but almost all my life I have been invited as an invited professor in different places. From Switzerland, from Lausanne, I've been invited, and I say this because it's important from my point of view. For 3 years in the Academia of Architecture in Mendrisio, I have taught the postgraduate program here in Greece, in central Greece, in the University of Thessaly. numerous workshops every year, and I have many friends all over. I've been exposed and somehow been taught how one should really teach architecture. Lately, you're right. I could be considered professor of the National Technical University of Athens, but I have been elected just this year. And up to now, the last 8 years, I have been invited professor in the Politecnico di Milano, so I have this whole spectrum of different colleagues, different methods, different schools, different programs, and so on. You know, I have just one approach. The approach is not according, therefore, to a specific school program, but it is, I had the freedom as an invited professor, to present always the problem the way I felt would be good, or would be correct for the students. And there are not specific levels of students, there are different levels of students from second year to, as I said, postgraduate. Thesis students and so on and so forth. So it's been many years, and how I present the problem to the students or to a school or have this activity is I give a choice. I don't give a specific program, and the aim is to understand the site, if one might say, in the general terms, and what this needs, what architectural response this needs. And my conclusion to doing this is, even people, young students from second year up to the fifth year, they're all able to give a response. It's a great pleasure. Now, the response, of course, programmatically contains many different typologies and different approaches. Well, I believe strongly that the architects, what we should teach, let's say, it should contain a very, coming closer to your questions, a moral, first of all, and a intellectual somehow base, give this a moral intellectual base to a person of how an architect should think, today, really, we are not the discipline which historically always decided where something would be built, not only how it would be built. There are economic models that we follow, and the architect now is called to somehow make the decision of an economic model sort of a nice building, pushing our society to this culture of the image. I forbid in my office that they open Pinterest, for example. I mean, we go into the image and we try to find a solution. But this is what really, if I may say this vulgarly, it's what the market really needs. But therefore, we must, I believe, teach the students this resistance, that the architect, it's as a figure in a society, it's much more important than to deal and manipulate images, okay? Because this is what really society is asking. So this is one of the basic questions. What are we? Many times I speak with my friends all over. What is? We have a responsibility. I mean, we have a responsibility. These people go and then they try to get a placement in an office, but big offices. I don't want to say the names now. We all know, who really treat images. This big, very little research. So I believe the school has a responsibility for that, and I think that teaching must embed in the head of the student and the future architect how an architect should think. Okay. Now, having said this, I agree with what has been said up to now. Yes, there are many different aspects of architecture that one has to learn. You know, one has to, as Francesco was saying, put a brick over a brick. Structure, you know, structure, one of the most important things. Even though we're not structural engineers, but we're not people also that just create an image and we call the structural engineer to solve it. We have, this is a spatial idea of the structure. You know, building has to stand. So what normally I do, I pick some sites. I give them the choice of the site, alluding to that. What Kant was saying, that there has to decide where to build. Okay, he was alluding to that in terms of the site of an area of geographical, contained area. But I give him this decision also, because this is the beginning of how they have to think. And programmatically, what comes out, yes, it could be housing, it could be some public building, depending on what they are treating. There's always the idea contained of the public space. For example, in my speaking of the last experience of Milano, is that there were different, I chose some themes from my analysis of what I interpreted the city of Milan, and I gave them choices in the different years. And we made a big sort of a new map of Milan, of areas that are abandoned and whatever. Some were to be transformed, modified, some were to be done new. And now we moved outside in the periphery, which is this connection between the city center and what is our new city. Mostly what Francisco was saying, you know, this new city, this new public space, and what it should be. Now that could be an area where there is housing, that could be an area that there is the public space. The public space could be public buildings, but only designing this public space, okay? This is very important. And now I had to think, once I was elected full professor in the National Technical University of Athens, as finishing my academic career here, because I'm all these years, you know, and what should I do? So I told them I would like to do the first year. And what to do the first year is to create a series of exercises from elements of architecture and make this young, build enthusiasm into these young architects, you know, to start and work with space, with the void, you know, just simple principles that we love and makes our profession fantastic. And this is what I really believe. You know, it's a sort of a global, if you will, conception of what I could offer to the students. But you know, I also offer and open this problematic aspect of education. You know. Yes. And I close my discourse here.
Thank you. Thank you. We have to move on. Yeah. Hello, Louise. Sorry, I have to speak in English. Louise, you are a student, and so don't be shy, and tell us about your research. That it seems to be very interesting. So.
Okay. So first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation and for giving me the chance to participate to the seminar with all the great architects and professors you are. As a student, I'm going to speak quickly about the pedagogy and student education on housing design. As it was said in the text we received and the presentation you made, the housing design exercise is a very important point of architect formation. In my school, the housing question is mostly treated in the second and the third year of lessons. And this teaching is made in different ways depending on the professor and the studio approach. In most of the studio I've been in, housing design is taught through the study of several historical and contemporary references. By doing this study, the professor gives us a set of tools that helps students to deal with many aspects of housing design. such as the interior composition, the distribution of the building, its shape, and everything you mentioned in the text you said. But generally, these thematics are treated from time to time on one reference and not on another. And the problem is this method does not make it easy for students to clearly identify the actual challenge we're dealing with and how each architectural structure is learned to respond to it in different ways. So on the pedagogy, I think it would be very interesting and helping to think about a referencing results of architectural design of housing by highlighting how each of them provides an answer on the thematic. For example, I worked this year on crossing living room for my master dissertation, and I learned how this structure of living room in many ways contributes to natural ventilation and better lighting of the apartment. Then we could reflect about thematic related to actual challenge of housing design, such as surface optimization, natural ventilation, summer comfort, ecological construction system and materials, and so on. And then several architectural concepts can be studied through the way in which they respond to this specific theme. And all of these concepts, of course, will be illustrated by different references, but the main subject of this study will be the concept and not the example itself. So the purpose of this idea is to give us a set of tools intended to be adapted to specific architectural context, but also to allow us to completely understand the concepts we are using in order to be able to improve them in accordance with current economic, ecologic, and social issues, such as the one you just debated about rehabilitation, about new housing in the historical setting.
Okay. Thank you, Luis. And then you go to Ricardo. Ricardo, thank you for being with us. So,
good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with Faoub and Luis. Great to see you again. I will make my communication based on a double point of view, because I will give you some position looking from the practice point of view as someone involved as an architect in a public housing program, which I am doing right now in Lisbon. And I am also looking to the subject from the point of view of a professor of architecture. Generally, I teach third year in the normal curriculum of Portugal, because we have 5 years as many other schools, and we call it integrated master. So I will teach the last year of the first cycle. And I think when we have to face the housing question, which is very rich in terms of history of architecture, we have to face the problem that academia didn't solve, how to give the legacy of the research to the public institutions or the city council. So there is not the porosity between what students do research and what people involved with the programs know. So I think if we want to change the status quo of the system, this connection between academical research and people programming the city should be much more direct. And obviously, I would say they could be Siamese. When I won this competition that I am now developing the project, I felt exactly this, because the syllabus, the program was really well instructed, but one could tell that all the contemporary research around the main themes of how to live in terms of flexible space, evolution of family, different kinds of family, the meaning of collective spaces or common spaces, as someone put it here before, all this was not synchronized with the amount of research that many schools of architecture are producing. From the panel here, I know that in Madrid, since the 90s, marvelous things were being produced, and probably only a small amount of those research were used in the public housing program. So I think this is the main issue if you want to connect the schools with public housing programs. The second, it's the difficult challenge of ecology or climate change. This is a personal position, but I think that if we want to face the issue, we have to go against what economy is telling us, because we cannot build a building to last 35 years, which is something that it started in the 90s and it's still up here. We have to change this. We should build to last as long as possible. So if we want to do it well, we will be according to a certain ecological position. And again, like on the previous theme, I don't think that the academical research is used on the public housing program, because when a public housing program is asking us 10 to 15% of recycled material in a 25,000 square meter building, I mean, it's impossible. If we face regulation and the reality of the market, it's impossible. It's impossible to use it with the amount of euros that we can spend by square meter. So again, academical research could solve the problem. We have to invent new ways to do housing. One possible way, I think, is to go back again to prototypes of elements. They could be kitchens, bathrooms, and obviously constructional elements. And then I think the third thing that I would like to bring here, I think it's probably the most relevant in the European city. It's the relation of the history of housing and the city itself, the urban fabric. It's very rich, and I don't think we can separate the housing issue with the urban fabric issue. It's the same. And the legacy that we have from the last century, which is absolutely marvelous, from all the masters of the modern movement and all masters of the post-war and all the masters of the tendenza and all the masters of the Portuguese architectural school, they all always showed us that the housing architectural issue, it's always a problem of city and never an isolated thing. And that's why when private companies do large housing projects in the big metropolitan areas of any European city, La Città Diffusa, as the Italians call it, we feel a kind of alienation always, because the housing question is one thing, it's an object, and the public space, sometimes it's another one completely different, and they are not thing as an holistic thing. And if you want to change, again, something for the future, I think that housing programs should include big public space and pieces of urban fabric attached to it. Otherwise, this alienation will continue. And the last thing that I would like to bring here is the pavilion of the Belgian pavilion in the last Biennale of Venice, the Architectural Biennale, was very, very interesting in my point of view, because in the pavilion would come in, and in one altimetric level, which is, I would say, like 1 meter 50, 60, there were a lot of models of buildings that one could merge into. And the beautiful thing about the models is that they were buildings from the late Baroque, neoclassical buildings, late 19th century eclectic buildings, anonymous buildings, protagonists, but also modern buildings, modernist buildings, Bauhaus-oriented buildings, and also new buildings, contemporary projects. They are not yet built, but they are I mean, they are waiting to be built. And the statement of the pavilion was that, because the question of the curator was how we will live together. And the answer of the Belgian pavilion was, we will live together if we continue to overlap knowledge and overlap time and be able to understand that the city is something that it's always in permanent transformation, but we always believe that it can be better. So if we take that legacy of this overlapping of time, history of architecture, I think we can give something to the students and to future citizens. Otherwise, the European city will be an endless suburbia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. I don't know, Rafael, if we have questions from the audience.
No, unfortunately, no.
No, not yet. Never mind. We can still go on. I think there are two or three things that have emerged in most of your interventions. The question of social responsibility, which I agree it's awfully important. Also, the question of the connection between housing and urban questions. I agree with Ricardo. There is no, it's not possible to think about housing without thinking about the city. And also the lessons about the conventional, let's say, so the traditional, the common city are lessons that have to be studied. And my belief is that they can live together. There are lessons from the modern movement. There are lessons from the 19th century or even before that can be understood and make them live together and collaborate somehow. And this sort of thing, the relationship between what we learn from the past, it's quite important. Ricardo also approached a theme that is quite important in the main session. The LACOL, the Catalan group of architects, were explaining us that they built, they made a new building without a garage, skipping the mandatory rules in Barcelona, and they somehow managed to change the rules. The rules, I think, it's one of the big disasters of our era, because they are so restrictive that we cannot innovate and we cannot make things work. I'd like a view on this, on your feeling of this subject. How in this moment the hyper-regulation that oversees the housing production, and even the thinking and the academic research about the housing is restricting evolution and adaptation to new paradigms. Who wants to comment on this? Anyone?
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Yes. Go on.
So, when I spoke about porosity between academia and professional world, let's call it institutional or just the offices that we have, I think that we needed a different approach to the rules. Why? Because they are creating a form of alienation also. As Leo was putting it before in his intervention, the houses, the typology of housing right now, today, it's more or less the same everywhere. Two completely different realities. And the reason to do this is because the rules are very similar everywhere. And this is something that it was the worst reading of the Neufert legacy. You have to change it completely because it was 50 years ago. So one way to go, I think, well, that's how we are trying to solve it. It's what I'm doing, it's that I'm creating like hardcore walls around the typologies, and inside people just can take it out if they want it. So the limits, the perimetrical limit of the typology, it's tough, it's thick, and inside you can take, in the limit, you can take everything and you can live in a place with one closed space, which is a bathroom. This is not legal. It's impossible. If we want to propose this in a competition, probably we will be excluded because we are not going after the law. So the way to go is to simulate that we are going with the rules and make it possible so the inhabitants, once inside the apartment, they can transform it according to their own reality.
Yes, some more opinion.
If I can, I would like to make comments about, I found the intervention of Ricardo very interesting, and thanks for his comments. Because like I was trying to say in my previous intervention, I think that the problem of creating some responsible person as an architect, I think, is strictly connected to the transformation of what Ricardo says about the porosity between the academia and the administrations. The administration most of the time are done by architects that are coming out from the academia. So that's why I think, and I agree with you totally, there is a sort of a schizophrenia between academia and what is the real world, let's say that, which is not. But and I think this is an issue that we as a school, we should really work all together. And I found this opportunity of this exchange, because what you just said is similar in Italy, and I guess it's in the other countries. But it's not only a problem of rules, which are also, yes, very important, but I think the porosity should be also in the vision of the town that normally, I mean, in Italy, the administrations doesn't have. So some proposals done by the academia, most of the time, they are not thought that there could be interesting opportunity for the town of looking how to transform a site. So it's a problem, of course, of rules, but on another level, I think it's a problem also of understanding what the academia is trying to do.
Thank you. Leo? Your micro is off. Sorry. Yes.
Again, I'm using the almost like a litmus test, the small place of Croatia, where our school, up to the very recent history, had a monopoly on architectural professions. So the professors of the school are also the designers, and all the architects who are running the government and all the regulation are actually our students. So in a way, it's like a one big happy family, where the architect, where the destiny of architecture in one culture is somehow run by the very similar group of people. So in a way, it's interesting how that parallel can also be made with the system of regulations that we are talking about, that is like highly governing all the housing thinking, and also this incredible freedom of creation that we somehow as architects, and I think most of us are here are kind of sitting on the two chairs at the same time, being design architects and also professors. So this kind of almost like a schizophrenic situation, it's kind of like a deeply affecting the way we teach. Can we teach students to rebel? against the legislator and against the sometimes illogical laws and regulations that are written into this. How do we inspire them to be to be creative on their own, to kind of somehow reinterpret these rules and regulations in their own terms and make this kind of step forward? That seems to me like can you teach a student to be exuberant, or you are supposed to teach them the basic rules and regulations? I think that's the fundamental question of the day. And I think that the subject of housing, which is in a way almost like architecture without architects, like everybody thinks that they know what a living space should look like. Maybe that's precisely why I'm repeating myself. This particular area is the field where architectural education can somehow make some steps forward.
Thank you. We have some information that we should finish in 4 minutes. So it's like in a political debate. We have 4 minutes. Who wants to use them?
I'd like to add something, if possible.
Yes. 2 minutes to each one of you.
Okay, no, it's
Deborah, no, 2 minutes to Deborah and 2 minutes to.
Okay, thank you. It's perhaps something out of the topic we were following now, but somehow also related. I really appreciate some comments by Leo mentioning housing as a learning tool. It reassures me regarding the way we are teaching housing, and also something related to the failure in some cases of the 60s and 70s. And because I am very loving with this period and I've been studying it, I teach it. I use it as a tool to reflect on what housing, let's say mass housing has been. And I really think that we can learn a lot on failure study cases, on failure study cases. And but there are also positive things to think that came up with this analysis. So it's perhaps by studying what we have failed during the last decades that we can come up with new ideas on what we need now. So I will never try to hide the past when reflecting to the future. That is something that I believe that Southern Europe has a very in their souls that we always learn from the past, from the discipline, etc., to try to go a step forward. Okay, so this is only my just last comment about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Nikos.
Yeah, just 1 minute. I agree so much with the discourse of Ricardo before, because this is how what the architect really, we have to teach them how to think. And he's saying, well, I'm trying to go over superate these rules by creating a situation where it could be transformed by itself. Okay, I mean, I think, strongly believe that these regulations sometimes going to school programs are completely wrong. It's completely wrong. We're not there to learn. We're going to learn about space, to learn about innovation, to learn about how we can live in a new way, new ways of living, and follow progress this way. And regulations will always change. There will always be. So I think this is there are two things that should not be confused. One is taught and how one practices. If one is taught correctly, we practice correctly. Basically, that's what Ricardo was saying before. Thank you.
Well, we have to finish. I'll be with the impossible task of summarizing what has been said, but I'll do my best and trying to, in the recap session, make notice of a lot of interesting things that you have said here today. So thank you, and until next time. I hope to see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.